Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo, and we have a new guest this week, Robert J. Crane. He is a, contemporary fantasy author and epic fantasy author. We'll get the lowdown from him in a second, but I wanted to read his extensive bio from Amazon first, so you get a feel of who the guy is. All right, ready? Robert J. Crane enjoys video games, travel, and the occasional nap. All right, and he's also the author of the tremendously popular Girl in the Box series, the follow-up Out of the Box series, and the Sanctuary and Southern Watch series. Hello, Robert.
Hey, Lindsay.
He's going to be chatty too, I can tell.
Yeah, I'm a real chatty person. Well, I might be taking a nap right now because
if you get a glazed look in your eyes, we'll just assume you're playing like whatever, Bejeweled or something over on the side.
I spent a lot of time on Batman Arkham Knight today, so I'm kind of checked out after collecting a lot of Riddler trophies, bringing him to justice. But
all right, we'll try to be halfway as interesting as that. But why don't you get started telling us, how did you get started with your writing and what led you to self-publishing?
Okay. I actually got a degree in English with a focus on creative writing, and I intended to be an author because I had been messing around with my own stories since I was in 4th grade. I think I wrote a book for a school assignment, and I liked it so much that I started writing other books. And I never finished anything after that. It was always, I'd start and I'd get 5 chapters in, and then I'd lose focus and move on to something else later or whatever. And so I went to school, to college, intending to be okay, I'll go to college, I'll get my degree in creative writing, and afterward that will magically make me an author. I'll be able to actually finish a book at that point. And it didn't work out that way. I came out of college hating writing because they made me write a bunch of stuff I didn't really want to write. Spent about a year substitute teaching, and then moved across the country and went into the financial services field, where I spent 8 years in sales and sales management, training people to market financial services products, which is about as interesting as, well, it's probably less interesting than pulling people's teeth, especially if you're a sadist. Anyway, so I spent 8 years doing that, but the plus side was I had to do things like cold calling, which was, again, not fun. Pulling people's teeth might actually be more merciful. But it gave me the discipline to actually, when I finally got inspired by a story, again, after years of not writing after college, it gave me the discipline to sit down and finish it. I wrote 180,000 words in something like 2-3 months when I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. And so I started looking into how do you become an author after that, because I got dissatisfied with my business and the way things were going in the finance world after the mortgage meltdown. Figured out about querying and submitting and said, that's really not anything I would be interested in. And then 6 months later, I hit another low, looked it up again and found out about Amanda Hawking and Conrath and some other names that aren't quite as familiar, like B.B. Larson and David Dalglish. And, it was all laid out. There's a path where you can be your own boss, do your own thing, and control your own content instead of, the story I was working on at the time was the Sanctuary series, which is an epic fantasy series. And I had it planned out from the start as an 8-book epic fantasy, and, the ending ties to the very beginning. And I was going to have to have plotted it out. I knew how it was going to end. And it was going to require heavy pull-through from book 1 to book 8. I mean, it wasn't going to be very self-contained. And I thought about it, and I'm like, I don't think this is going to go well if I have to submit it to a publisher. They're going to be like, this isn't a full story. This is garbage. This is too serialized. This is, not. And so, I mean, when I found out I could control it myself and write the story I wanted to write without having somebody else tell me this is wrong, this isn't the right fit, and, I was all over it. I think I quit my financial services business 3 weeks later. Told my wife I'll stay home with the kid and write part-time. And that first year I wrote 2 books. The next year I wrote 5, I think, and started making a full-time income at that point, and that was 2012, and haven't looked back since. So there we go.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your success. I imagine it was a lot of fun trying to call people and sell them stuff after they lost like 500,000 in their stock portfolio.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah, that was not fun.
I can see why you wouldn't have wanted to deal with agent rejections after that, after being rejected so much by potential clients.
Well, and it wasn't. I don't even think it was. In financial services, the rejection is easier because it's like they're not rejecting me; they're rejecting the product that the company made. If they're an agent's rejecting me, it's like they're rejecting the product I made. That's personal at that point. Like your story sucks, kid. Get out of here. I'm really not good enough. It's worse. It's so much worse.
I can definitely see where that would be the case. Just out of curiosity, what made you go from epic fantasy to, sounds like you're doing more contemporary fantasy now, or urban fantasy?
Well, I had an idea. I really like the epic fantasy field. I didn't read a ton of it when I was a kid. I started reading it more like when I was in college and fell under The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. But I had this idea because I was a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer back in the day and Angel, and I love that whole world, and I really love the idea of Buffy as a protagonist and how like awesome she was. And I wanted to write a female protagonist with power that was just a badass. Actually, that's a common theme in a lot of my books. So Girl in the Box was about a girl who was 17 years old when we meet her, and she's had a lot of adversity in her life, and it's about her really. The first book's really about her discovering her power and what makes her special in the world, and finding courage within after having a horribly abusive childhood. And so I don't know. I just latched onto it, and I was like, this is the kind of thing I always wanted to write. So I just moved right into that from epic fantasy, and it sold I think 10 to 1 what my epic fantasy was doing at the time, and it became kind of like I'm a big fan of the Marvel movies and the Marvel universe, and I was a comic book kid growing up, and so that's kind of my way to embrace what I loved in my childhood of superhero type stuff. And so yeah, I love writing that for a while, and then I go back to writing epic fantasy with the swords and the and the travels and horses and everything. So I get to be a geek all the time. It's kind of the best job ever.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's pretty fun to make up stuff and get paid for it.
No.
All right. Well, we're going to ask you some more questions about the marketing later, and kind of specifically what your plans were and how you jumped into becoming so successful so quickly. But I'm kind of curious, when I look at your list of books on Amazon, you've just put out so many books. Considering, did you get started in 2011? You said.
Yeah, my first book was June of 2011 is when it came out.
All right. Well, you're well over 20, if not 30 books on there now. So I'd love to hear, like, what's the secret to your productivity and how do you keep the words flowing?
Actually, you had. I was looking through the your webpage for the podcast before like the other day, and I saw you had is it Rachel Aaron?
Rachel Aaron, yeah.
Yeah. So 2K to 10K. I mean, that's the like one of the best things out there if you can follow her program, because I mean she outlines some great points for basically just being enthusiastic about what you're writing. Have a basic idea of what you're going into writing for the day. Like I'll get on my treadmill desk when I start the day, and I'll have it outlined. Like I need to be on the treadmill desk for an hour before I take a break, and I can write about 3,000 words an hour. I noticed your guest last week was like 5,000 words an hour. I'm like, oh. Like I thought I was fast, but like 5,000 words an hour, holy smokes! Like, whew, that's amazing. But anyway, I do about 3,000 words an hour that first hour, and then I'll break it up and I'll do about 10, basically 10 20-minute sprints throughout the day, and that gets me to about 10,000 words because I do about 1,000 words every 20 minutes. And so I just have it set up that it's like I need to have this done by 8:45 in the morning. I need to be on the next 40 minutes of sprints by 11, and I have an idea before I start writing. What is the scene that I'm writing? What's the tension? What's the setback going to be at the end of the scene? And so, I mean, I go into it with enough of an idea that, and I'm excited enough about what I'm writing that it makes it easy for me to keep going and hit high word counts. And so I generally do about 10,000 words a day, and I might finish at noon, I might finish at 3, and then I'm done, and I'm going to go do something else for the rest of the day. And that's very motivating too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Chris was a little bit of an overachiever, but we liked having him on. Gives us a reason to like feel inadequate, so that's always good. Stay humble, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's wow. That is quite something. 5,000 words an hour. Mercy.
All right. Well, I'm gonna ask just one more question, then let the guys ask you a few questions. I was kind of curious. You've done like a great job of focusing on series, which is what we all tell people, new authors, to do. Do you think that's been the key to your success? And have you learned anything from writing and publishing so many books and series?
Yes. Okay. So absolutely, writing series is the key to my success. It absolutely is. And I've had this argument with other indies before, and it's not really an argument. It's just me saying, your best chance of success is to write in a series. You can succeed with standalones, and I think we probably all know some indies that have hit it big with a few standalones. And hey, kudos to them. More power to them. And if someone really wants to write standalones, I wouldn't be like, no, go forth and write drudgery of series, because that's going to show through in their work, and they're going to probably not end up being very successful at it if they're not enjoying to some extent what they're writing, especially if they're new and they don't have the craft down to be able to to write and be a sellout and whatnot. I'm joking a little bit there, but not entirely. So I like writing in series because I was a big fan of TV growing up, and I loved the cliffhangers at the end of a season or at the end of an episode that would keep you moving on into the next episode. Like I remember being at the end of a TV shows like Best of Both Worlds on Star Trek, where Mr. Worf, fire, geek reference for those out there, and you're like, what's going to happen next? And I wanted to give that feeling through my books. And we've all seen those in books, too, where you get to the end of, like, Harry Potter 4, and you're like, no! How can you leave it like that? I need to know what happens now! And so I love that about series writing, and I wanted to be able to tell stories that were so epic that you could do that, and you were so involved with the characters, you wanted to know what happened next. And I think that's a big reason that my fans like to keep reading my books. And so the nice thing about it for us indies is we're not going to sell in most cases as many units per book as a traditionally published one that gets put out on the front table at like Barnes and Noble and has paper distribution and whatnot. And we don't need to, because we make more per copy than they do by a lot. But at the same time, we have the advantage if we do a series, because you build this sales funnel. And let's say you do it like I did with 10 books in the Girl in the Box series. I promo book 1, and people buy that if it's free now. But if they they would get that, and then they would read the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one if they liked it and were still interested. And so I've advertised one book, but I end up getting sell-through all the way through all of them. And so I don't have to get like 20,000 new people to read my one book that I've got out there in order to make 20,000 sales. I get like 3,000 people, and when it all filters through, I end up with 20,000 sales. And so it just makes it easier than trying to get out there with one book and it doesn't sound wrong, but like flogging that one book, like promoting that one book, like this is my one book, it's the one book I've got, make it a success, make it. Yeah. Series allows you to build a funnel, and you pour people in through the top, and they don't all make it down to the bottom, but you get sales throughout the whole thing. And as a result, if you get a book bub and you pay the $600 or whatever for it, instead of just selling that one book and making your money back on it, you're selling through 8 or 9 or 10 more volumes, or 6 or 5 or whatever your series is. And so yeah, it makes it easier for indies to make a living, and it makes it easier for indies to make money. And so I would encourage people, if they're disposed towards series, do that. Or if you want to make a living, do that. If you just want to do it for your art, do whatever you want. Make sense?
Makes sense to me. So if I read your first book, I'll totally be left on a cliffhanger. Is that what you're telling me?
Not the kind that's like they're hanging on the edge of the cliff by their fingers or anything, but I do tend to twist emotional moments at the very end, or have some major revelation that will change the game for the next book. I'm guilty of that.
All right, well, I've heard that's what sells the books and gets them to read all 10 of them, so nothing wrong with that.
It's a winning strategy.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass you off to Jeff. He has a few questions too.
All right.
Alrighty. So, with regards to your series, you're mentioning that obviously it's best, especially when you can attract more people. I mean, I've got a couple series myself, and it does work great. Can't agree with you more on that. When it comes to other authors, trying to start a new series, I've heard a lot of people say that, and we've had guests on here that say that that they recommend when you start a new series, wait until you at least have 2 or 3 books out before publishing it, because that way it tend to help sales out a lot better. I was just wondering if you agree with that, because me personally, I don't, because if I'm starting a new series, I'll just, as soon as I get the book finished, I'll go ahead and publish it.
Um, I would tend to do what you do, not because it's necessarily I don't know that there's a clear answer on that one, to be honest. I mean, Amazon would know. My last series I launched, Southern Watch. The first book came out in January, and the second one came out about a month later. And it got good traction. I mean, it seemed to work really well that way. There was some other stuff we did with that launch that helped blow it out to a wide audience. But I don't know that I don't know that I have a good answer for you on that one. I think you could do it either way, and ultimately I launched like what you're talking about, where I put out a book most of the time, and then when the next one's ready, I put it out, and when the next one's ready, I put it out. Can you do it the other way? I'm sure you can. There's always someone who goes and proves that you can be successful doing something in a way that I'm like, wow, that's not the way I would have approached it, but apparently it also works. So I don't know. Maybe there's something to the algorithms of that. My friend Mimi Strong used to say that if you have 3 books up all at the same time in a series, then the sell-through is a lot higher on book 3 when you do get that. So I guess if you really wanted to retain your audience the entire time, she had the stats, and I mean, it went down stunningly even by 3 weeks if the third volume wasn't out or came out like 3 weeks later. It was down like 50% or something like that over what it could have been, and she had done it. She'd written enough series that she actually knew this. But yeah, my tendency is like as soon as I write something, I want to publish it and like start reaping. Honestly, I care more about reaping the feedback, sad to say. But I also like to reap the rewards as well. But I mean, I think you can do it either way. I'm not as in tune with the algorithm wizards that I knew as I used to. But I mean, you probably should ask someone like Edward Robertson or Phoenix Sullivan about that. They would know way better than I would. But I think
I just can't even fathom thinking, okay, I've got a completed book. Let's just push it off to the side. Let's just wait until we get number 2 done. Like, oh, hell no. I've written it. It's ready. Release it. Go and let the fans take a look at it, because I haven't ever started something that I have failed to finish. So I like to at least have fans believe that if I start a series, I'm sure as heck going to keep going, or else I'll clearly end it and let everyone know that I ended it. But,
right. I mean, I think it's gonna. Yeah. I think it's down to whatever you prefer. But I mean, I don't know that it makes a tangible difference in sales one way or another.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it could. I'm not, like I said, I'm not super in tune with that. I wouldn't, and I haven't launched a new series since like last November, so I don't even know. Things change so quick in this game nowadays.
Seriously. When you first started writing, have you always released your books priced at $4.99, or is it something that as you gained more traction, more fans, did you start raising the prices up a little bit?
I raised those prices, pretty early on, like I want to say the spring of 2012, right about the time I released the first book in the Girl in the Box series, because I'm pretty sure I launched it at $4.99, or else I had it at $4.99 very shortly thereafter. So, and it was the third book I published. So yeah, I did it very early on, and it's made it very easy for me to not have to have a lot of angst over should I raise my prices later? No, I've always been at $4.99, and if people want to buy it, then my books, then they'll buy them, and if they don't, then and I do get the complaint every now and again, like, so expensive.
All you got to do is say, oh yeah, well, find one of those traditional publishers there. The book is $16.99. The Kindle is $14.99. Like, you greedy SOBs. It doesn't have to be that high, but
yeah, I mean, like Neil Gaiman wrote a book a couple of years ago, The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Fantastic book, really good. And they've kind of monkeyed with the paperback, or maybe Amazon just estimated it wrong. But when I read it the first time around, I think it had said 180 pages, and I bought it. It was like $16 or $17.99. It was a really good book. I mean, I don't regret buying it at that price, but at the same time, anyone who has a price sensitivity issue, yeah, exactly what you said. Go talk to traditional publishing because they'll really hose you.
So do you always just keep your titles right at $4.99, or like say after a year or two, do you say, okay, sales like this one might be dipping a little bit, let's just drop it down to like $3.99 or $4.99, $3.99, whatnot, or you just like give them one price and that's it?
I do with the first book in the series, or the first 3 books in the series. A lot of times I'll do a box set type offer on them. And I did lower the price on Volume 4 of my Sanctuary series, which is now $4.99. It used to be $7.99 because it is. My formatter did some really good work with this, where he decreased the margins. It would have been over a 1,000-page book. It's 306,000 words, and so
that's one book.
That's one book, yeah.
Oh damn.
Yeah, tell me about it. I really bought into the idea of writing epic fantasy, but that was $7.99 for the longest time, and it actually made more money than book 2 of the series. It sold less, but it made more money than book 2 of the series, and so I don't even necessarily think $4.99 is like the top of the scale or the chain or whatever you want to call it. I think I probably could raise my prices and I'd be all right. I don't want to. I think you start losing people at that point. But Russell Blake isn't his at like $5.99?
You know what? I think so.
Maybe I misremember. Anyway, but to answer your question, no, I don't really mess around with backlist and discount it. At some point, I might do that in order to drive sales, but I haven't really felt a need to. When it comes time to promote that aging backlist, I usually my play is first 3 in a box set, make it 99 cents or drop it down to perma-free and get that thing on a BookBub and watch the sales fly for a little while.
Absolutely. So from concept to completed book,
mm-hmm.
How long does it, if you don't mind me asking, how long does it take for you to finish one?
Depends on the book.
Okay, let's just say an average of 100,000 words.
The rate I've been going lately, if I start writing it on a Monday, I'll be done with it the next Friday because I do about 10,000 words in a day.
That's not bad at all. Not bad at all.
I mean, it could go a little slower. I might slack off a little bit in there. Or I might take a day off and play Batman or something else, whatever.
You gotta have priorities, man.
Yeah, exactly. Villains need to be apprehended. He's going to protect the Gotham if I don't. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, let me pass you over to Joe. He's got a couple of questions for you, too.
All right.
Yep. My first question, you actually sort of answered way at the beginning, but I'm going to modify it because I'm a professional interviewer type guy. You talk about writing very strong like series arcs. Like you planned out your first series, 8 books from the start.
Yes.
And you still continue to do that, I assume, right?
I do. I mean, I have an idea of how all of my series are going to end.
Okay. Now, well, let's say you write your 8 or 10 book arc, and you get to the end, and it's like, what do you do if the audience is raring for more? Do you just decide once and for all, nope, this is how it ended, I'm not going to continue, or do you sort of leave yourself the possibility of more stories in the same setting?
So that's a great question. Actually, so I basically I don't leave it up to the audience necessarily, because I'm not much of an artist. Like I always tell people, no, I mean, if you talk to me like and compare me to like a pure artist, someone who's like, I do this for the love of it. It is the greatest thing ever. I don't deal with business. Like that's not me. I have a hard time talking with pure artists because I like want to talk about the business side of it, and that frustrates them, and then I get frustrated at them because I'm like, you're living in freaking fantasy land here, okay? Anyway, we have just the miscommunication thing. Great people, I'm sure. It's just, we don't speak the same language necessarily. So what happens with that is I'm enough of an artist that if I got to the end of a series and I didn't feel like I had anything new, original, or fresh to say, I would end at that point and be done with it. My problem is with Girl in the Box, I had planned to end it at 10. It was a wildly successful series, and if I hadn't had anything else to say, I'd have been like, okay, well, I guess I'm done because I don't want to retread the same ground. I don't want to, just do this for the money because I would feel like A, I'd feel like a sellout. B, I'd feel like I wasn't delivering something that would be really good for my brand in the long term. Like, people wouldn't cross over to other series. Not that they do at a hugely high rate, but they'd get to that and they'd be like, he's lost it, and he's jumped the shark, he's finished. So when I got to about book 7 or so, I still had ideas for how I could proceed in the future with like procedural type storylines, but I didn't have an idea for like what would differentiate this from what I've already done. And I cracked it around that time. Like, someone had written something in a review, and I was actually reading reviews, which don't do that, but I was doing it in this one case, and they had hit on a point that summarized the series in a way I'd never really thought of it, and it instantly gave me the idea. It cracked the code for what I would have to do in the sequel series, and I'm like, boom. And so it was easy for me to do that. And so the same thing with the Sanctuary series. I'd love to take some of those characters and put them in a different setting as a sequel. I draw the line on my Southern Watch series. Like, I'm on book 4 of it right now, and I feel like that one I'll need to stop at book 10. I feel like I'll have said everything. Now watch. I had an idea for a sequel series, but it's just too close and too like I've done this before type thing. Now, between now and when I ended in like 2017 or whenever I finish with it, maybe I'll have a different idea. But anyway, so the answer is I wouldn't do it just for business if I didn't feel like I had something new, fresh, and interesting, or a different approach to the series to twist it and turn it on its head, because I am enough of an artist that I'm not doing it just for the cash, and I'm not there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I just, for my own purposes, I like to be excited about what I'm writing. It makes it easier for me to write a lot of words. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And
Okay.
it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's one of those things where it'll sort of find its own level anyway, because if you do start writing stuff for the money or because people want you to and you're not really into it, pretty soon the money won't be there because it'll be clear that you weren't into it and you're not putting a product out that people want to buy. So, yeah, it takes some dedication to the art in that way.
Well, I mean, I know a few writers that really do tread heavy on the craft, and they don't really like what they write. They like they basically do it for a living because their chosen genre wouldn't really work out that well for them. And so, and I feel bad for them because they're like, well, you can't write that. And I'm like, I can write whatever I damn well please. Like, I haven't written a book yet that I haven't wanted. And they're doing it like every day, and it's one of those things where they're on the even farther side of the spectrum of business than I am. And so I really do believe that you can write books entirely on craft alone and make money at it, but I don't know how I would personally be able to do it. So.
Yeah, and when you hear about that, when you hear about someone who can't they basically can't market there, they can't find an audience for what they actually want to write, so they end up becoming successful writing something they don't want to write. It really makes you wonder the quality of book they could have turned out if they were enthusiastic about it. Like, it's almost like those are the people that you wish you could donate an agent to. Where it's like, listen, you can't find your audience. This person's job is to find audience. Write the book you want to write, and we'll set you up with this person. Like, those are the people that need one.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so when you're finished, like, back to the mechanics of writing a book, when you're finished writing, I assume, do you hand off to an editor to be polished up, like, professionally?
Yep, I do. I go through 2 editors and a last-ditch error correction person. So, yeah, I do. I only do line edits though. Like, I don't do any content editing. That's just me. I don't like people messing with my story.
Yeah, likewise. So that means you've got multiple editors and therefore multiple edits. This lends itself to like sort of an assembly line approach. Do you have multiple books in the pipeline at once, or do you continue on like? Because it seems to me if you hand it off to an editor, they're going to take X amount of time to work through it, and then you're twiddling your thumbs unless you're writing the next book. So, how many books deep do you line up your pipeline?
Well, I'll give you an example for right now. Book 5 of my Out of the Box series is with my editor and has been since June 1st. No, June 4th. Oh, July 4th, sorry. And right now I'm working on the book 5.5 in my Sanctuary series. And once it's done, I'll throw that to her. Presumably, I think she said she'd have Out of the Box 5 back to me by about the 18th. I won't be done with this. So I'll do the one-day edits on that, and I'll throw it to the next editor, and I'll get back to work on the one I'm drafting right now. And so, yeah, I always have, 1 or 2 or 3 books in the pipe work, and I don't, wait sit around for one of them to get done with the editor before I get to work on the next thing. I mean, I've got it in mind to write 9 books this year, so it doesn't really lend itself to the sit and wait approach. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, I understand part-timers or full-timers who are like, I need a break, a mental break in between. Like that totally makes sense. This is the one that's with the editor right now is the 26th book I wrote, and so I used to do things differently back before, and now I've kind of streamlined the process, and it just flows easier for me at this point. So
Yeah. I'm not as prolific as you. I don't think very many people are as prolific as you in terms of the sheer amount of books you're writing in a year. But it's good for me. It's good to know that you have got more than one series that you're sort of updating at a time, because I have a couple of different series, and I have sort of been picked on for not just focusing on the moneymaker. And I have some people who've spoken to me and are like, anytime you spend writing something that's not your most popular series is time that you're wasting money. So I'm glad to hear about another person with a reasonable level of success who is jumping back and forth between multiple series.
tell them to go.
Yeah.
Never mind. I won't say it. Okay, so here's the thing about that. I get that. I hope they were nicer to you saying it than.
Well,
because I mean,
here's diplomacy.
Right. So here's the thing about that. You're writing one series, and it is your moneymaker, and you get to the end of that series, and you're not going to write a sequel. Boy, I hope that next one you're going to write takes off immediately, because otherwise your sales are going to experience a very steep drop in about 8 months, because nothing lasts forever, and nothing lasts at the chart for that long. So there's 2 reasons I write multiple series. One of them is because of exactly that, because you're talking about a one-legged man here. You're hopping around on one leg, and sooner or later that knee is going to go bad. It's better to have a couple of things. If you're reasonably prolific, if you can deliver it in a timely fashion, if it doesn't totally hamstring you and stress you out, then it's like pistons in a car or having a couple of legs going. You're going to get farther with 2 than with 1. The second part of that is it creatively refreshes me, because I write in a couple of different genres. Like I'll write my superhero-esque stories, and then I'll switch to epic fantasy, and it's like exercising a totally different muscle. Like I could write the 2 different ones on the same day, and I might even be able to do, if I really pushed, maybe 10,000 in each one without totally straining myself, because it's just different narratives.
Different inspiration pools.
Right, exactly. And so, there are a lot of reasons to do that if you feel like it's good for you. And the thing I've kind of figured out at this point, I've known enough writers that everybody just does things differently, and everybody can kind of find their own process, and they can kind of do whatever they want. And maybe it's just clickbait that people do it this way, but they're like, you must do it this way. I want to punch those people in the face. It's like, shut up. There are people that are successful that are doing it the opposite way. Just knock it off. There is no one true way. There is no one true path. Find what works for you. Enjoy yourself, if at all possible, and get good at your craft.
I got to agree.
Yeah, sorry, I'm putting my soapbox away now.
Hey, don't worry about it. And one last was kind of a little small one, but I've done a fair amount of epic fantasy writing, and I did a little bit of what you could consider urban or contemporary fantasy. And I want to ask, do you feel that people are a little bit more picky on the details of urban and contemporary versus epic? Because in epic, the entire setting is imagined, whereas in something that takes place in a familiar setting, you can say, well, hey, the Colt 911 is a 45 caliber, not a 9mm. Like, do you get rivet counters and stuff like that as a result of a familiar setting?
I don't, and because I've been waiting. There are people out there that are picky, and they will call you out for saying clip instead of magazine. And I've never gotten that. I keep waiting for some of them to but I don't know. So I haven't gotten a lot of those picky details. The ones I've gotten are when I've really screwed up. Like in one of my books, I had said the wrong Ireland was part of the United Kingdom, and that made someone very upset.
As it would.
Yeah, wrong country, wrong place. Yeah, not so good. So no, I haven't really gotten that. I have a very short memory for people who piss me off, though. So, if someone nitpicks me, that's the fastest thing they can do to get on my crap list. if they do it in a confrontational way at all. And I mean, if you've met that tiny pool of readers that is confrontational like that, I don't remember them for very long. I get really mad for about a day, and then I forget them completely after that. It's like a defense mechanism in order to prevent me from stewing on them, I guess. But no, I don't. I guess I haven't experienced that pickiness in urban fantasy. Yeah, I don't. I expected people to be pickier about my epic fantasy, to be honest, because I don't even think I'd ever ridden a horse before I started writing it. No one's gone and been like, yeah, no, horses aren't like cars, man. You have to actually feed them, and there's things you have to do to take care of them. I found this out later. So no, I've been very fortunate in that the nitpicks, I can't recall any that were like that.
Yeah, good for you. I didn't really in my contemporary stuff, not so much, but sci-fi. I got some people who know more about rockets than I do.
So here's the thing about sci-fi that you're gonna, I assume, run into, and this is something from my sales training days. There are 4 major personality types. The type of person that's a nitpicker is what you call a T or a technical type person. They're engineers. They're the type of people that not only know a lot, but they're going to tell you about it in exacting detail. Well, guess what kind of books they like to read? Sci-fi. And so, yeah, you'll get emails from those individuals. They do read epic fantasy, too, to some extent, but maybe they just don't know as much about horses. I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably it. Well, that completes my list of stuff, so now we're going to move to marketing, and I'm going to hand you back to Lindsay.
All right.
All right, before I jump in, I should tell you guys, I completely took horses out of my Emperor's Edge world because I had a reader who's a real horse aficionado, and every time she critiqued a chapter, she's like, no, this wouldn't happen. Horses don't do this. Horses are not like that. I was like, screw it. Everybody's having trains, and that's how I ended up writing Steam Age fantasy instead of typical epic fantasy. So there you go.
I made my main character's horse magic so that he would, that's why I wouldn't have to deal with that baloney.
There you go. All right, jumping into the marketing stuff. You already kind of mentioned that you're out of Girl in the Box series. I think you said sells 10-1 or something over your epic fantasy series. I was wondering if like why you thought there was such a big difference. Do you feel there's like a bigger epic or urban fantasy audience, or?
No, here's my feeling on it. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. It's just that I managed to get larger exposure for that series on my freebies than I've ever managed to get on my epic fantasy. And as a result, it was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I just focused more of my efforts on it. I put out more books in that line. They were easier to write because, I mean, you saw, if you were watching, one of my epic fantasy books is 300,000 words. Like, those take a while. The longest of my my Girl in the Box books is like, it was 101,000 words. That's the one I just finished writing, and most of them were like 70 to 90,000 words. So I mean, it was kind of like a vicious circle or vicious cycle, whatever they call it. I should know that as a writer. I guess I should be more familiar with that. But it became one of those things where because Girl in the Box got that exposure early on and blew up and sat at the top of the UK charts where the ecosystem was a little more friendly to not churning you out of the top 10 as fast, I managed to accumulate more of a following there. As a result, more people were waiting for those books. So as a result, I worked harder to get those books out faster, and I promoted that series more when it started to sag a little bit. And so, I mean, I think it's one of those things where maybe there's a bigger audience for it, but it caught fire quicker for whatever reason. It's probably a little more oriented to hook people from the outset than my epic fantasy story. And so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know about market size necessarily. My gut says it probably is a little bigger, but I don't. I think that the way that things played out and the fact that it did launch better out of the perma-free gate ended up helping it become a bigger success. And so maybe if I focus a little more attention on the epic fantasy now, it don't take as long to write the books in the series, maybe I'll see it blow up a little bit bigger.
All right, yeah, I've actually found, I don't know, it's just anecdotal evidence. Yeah, words are hard. That's why you're right, we don't talk. But I do believe there's more people that will pick up a fantasy that is set on Earth in contemporary times than want to be transported to another world. But you got to write what you love. And it definitely makes sense that shorter novels that you put out more quickly, more often, would be easier to kind of gain momentum with.
Do you see that with your more contemporary fantasy versus your Emperor's Edge?
You know, I've only got 2 books in my series of my contemporary one, and it's almost more science fiction. I'm not very good at formulaic writing, but I've actually seen it a lot with my pen name stuff, which is science fiction romance. I write space opera, so
Hmm.
it's totally made up and way in the future. And I see that on the on those charts where that's all together, that definitely the stuff that's set on Earth, where like aliens come to Earth in modern times, they just seem to blow the other stuff out of the water. So I don't know, just you know, what I've observed, can't prove anything, but
I think, yeah, that's interesting. My friend Nick Webb just hit big with a book he put out this last week, Constitution Legacy or something, or Legacy Fleet. I feel so bad, like I should be promoting him right now. But he's been at like 40. He's been in the 40s on Amazon, like of the top 100, for a little while now, and it's one of those where it's more of a um, a space opera that's not set on Earth, as I understand it. I should probably read it too if I'm going to. Anyway, but he had seen it, shoot off the charts. So I think a lot of it has to do with there might be big pockets of like epic fantasy readers and whatnot, because obviously Sanderson can sail to the top of the charts with his Stormlight Archive books. It's just, can you get that vastly segmented market honed in on your one offering type thing? And so, yeah, that's a tougher proposition for all of us out in indie land. How do we become part of the reading zeitgeist, as it were?
yeah, and it's always possible that some readers are more like conscious of, like, I want to stick to traditionally published authors. You know, I don't want to read this indie junk. And you know, I found with the romance stuff, that's not true. They'll read anything. Like, they don't get enough of what they want from traditional publishers, so they'll just, you know, anything that's the story's good, they'll try the sample and then buy it. So,
Right. Yeah. That
all
is
right,
very.
yeah. Next question for you. I was curious, you know, we've had a lot of people on who have had success with doing a book one perma-free, and it sounds like you started that way too. I saw that you had some of your box sets of the first 3 books perma-free. I was just curious what made you decide to try that and how that's working out.
Yeah, well, actually, I should thank you because I read one of your blog posts back when I first set the first perma-free free, and you were the one who gave me the inspiration to do it. I was like, oh, great. And so that one went, and my sales went from like $100 the month before to $1,000, and then the next, like 3 months later, I set Alone free, and then watched them like absolutely soar after that. So thank you, Lindsay, because you have made me a lot of money over the last few years.
Right. I'll expect the tip coming in the mail soon.
There you go.
Give me my address.
No, so I was sitting out in Vegas with SM Rain, who's a fantasy author, who's a really good friend of mine, and we were hanging out, and I like take her advice on almost everything possible because she is like absolute genius when it comes to marketing. And she had done a box set that she had first 3 of the books in her Descent series, and then she took them down to 99 cents from like $7.99, and it blew up. Like, I mean, her royalties just like shot through the roof. And then she went and perma-freed it, and I'm like, what? That's 3 books for, what? And she just started absolutely kicking my butt, like absolutely. Like before that, she was beating me. Like after that, she was just like just dragging me across the floor in a bloody mess. I mean, it was not even a contest anymore because we would talk sales data back and forth and whatnot. And she says to me as we're sitting there, and I'm just like trying to absorb the wisdom, and I maybe had a little bit of tequila. And she's like, the only reason I'm really beating you is because I just have more perma-frees, and it's more avenues of entry, and people are, more interested in picking up a 3-box set than that. And I'm like, like I'm a moron. Like I didn't know that before because it was such a different thing when we first started seeing it. Like, of course people are more interested in picking up 3 books on a free download than there are 1. That's duh. And so I did it with the Girl in the Box first, and I watched my sales go, oh, let's see, triple, quadruple, and I was already making pretty good sales by that point in time. So and so then I've done it with my Sanctuary series here in the last couple of months, and I've just been holding off a little bit, and I've got a book bub scheduled for a couple of weeks, and so I'm hoping to promote that and make it big too, in hopes of recapturing that mojo. We'll see if it works, but yeah, so that's why I did it. All
Yeah,
that's
I've definitely seen the same thing this year doing. I haven't done perma-free box set yet, but I've got two 99-cent box sets with books 1 through 3 of a series in there, and one of them really took off and hung out in the top like 300 of Amazon for a long time after a BookBub ad. And
Yeah.
I think too, when you get people to read more books in the series, that after 3 books they're like way more committed than maybe after 1 book. You're like, take it or leave it. It was okay.
Totally. They and especially if you write like, I don't know if it, like my fans say I write characters that are really unique or differentiated. I think that's debatable, and obviously I've got reviews that say quite the opposite. But I think if you give people a chance to emotionally invest in your characters, and then you just continue to put them through the crap that happens in a story, I think, yeah, absolutely. After 3 books, they're more invested in those characters, and they want to know that those people are going to turn out all right because they come off the page and they become more more like a living thing to them, I guess, and something they want to see the ending of. So, yeah, absolutely.
And I guess too, if you have 10 books in your series, giving away the first 3 isn't quite so crazy as if you only had 4 out too.
That would be that would be tough. I had looked at writing a trilogy in the future, and I'm like, I can't really do. I don't know what I'm going to do for long-term marketing if I write just a trilogy.
All right. Well, thanks for answering my questions. I'm going to hand you back over to Jeff to ask a few more.
All right.
Alrighty. So when it comes to advertising, what would you say is the least used, but it's well worth your time to check out?
I am probably the wrong person to ask this of, simply because the last ad I ran was in October, and it was a BookBub ad. So there are a lot of friends of mine that spend a lot of time and a lot of attention to ad blitzes and whatnot. And I keep meaning to get better at it, but I was selling a pretty decent number of books. I guess I was comfortable enough to be like, I don't really need to worry about that. I should really worry about that because I could probably be doing a lot better if I was. So I don't have an answer for you on that one. BookBub is the one obviously everybody knows, and that is the one I've used. I don't think I've had an ad through another site since. You know what? I'm not sure I've actually paid for an ad from another site since Kindle Fire. Is it Kindle Fire Department or something like that? Like a couple of years ago. Yeah. So I haven't paid for an ad other than through BookBub since probably 2013.
So BookBub is pretty predominantly what you use.
Yes, and rarely at that. I mean, I had one last October for the Girl in the Box 3-book set, and then I think maybe I had one in March of that year for my Epic Fantasy Defender, the first book in that series. And I don't think I had a BookBub for well over a year before that. So I'm planning to use them a little more this year. I don't know. My philosophy is like that Ludacris song, "All I Do Is Win," except mine is "All I Do Is Write," no matter what. I mean, that's all I do. Like, I haven't even updated my sales numbers in the last few months. I kind of handed them off to my wife, and she got busy, and she hasn't done them. So, like, all I do is write a bunch of words. Like, I don't even look at a lot of the other stuff, and I should, and I used to. I did it all at the beginning. Like, I spent lots of time on, like, pricing strategies, but, I mean, when you get in business for this long, I think there's a tendency to just focus on the number one thing. I've got the fundamentals in place. I just focus on the number one thing that makes me money and drives the revenue in the business at that point, and that is writing more books because I know what I'm going to price them at. I have my mailing list already in place. It takes me like 10 minutes to write up a mailing list. It takes me like 5 minutes to put together all my links on launch day and throw them in a Facebook post and a Twitter post. And so, I mean, that's the only thing. That's like the only things. So I just focus on the on the one thing I don't have on autopilot, which is writing the books. So
Yeah, I pretty much did the same thing as back when I first started. I was like, yeah, I'd watch all the trends. I'd watch, like what the numbers from this day, from this seller did this,
yep.
and that's when I only had one book a year. Like, you know what? Let's want to be the professional writer here, so let's just start working on the book. I haven't looked at that stuff in a good long while. I'm more concerned, like, okay, I've created myself a deadline for Amazon Kindle where a pre-order. Same thing with Smashwords. I'm gonna hit it, so that's what I'm worrying about essentially.
Well, and I mean, if you had told me even 2 years ago, like, or Robert, you don't need to check your sales numbers every day. Like, you could wait 6 months and it'll be all right. I mean, get a general idea of where you're at for the month. A quick one, but you don't have to tally it exactly every single week or every day. For a long time I was doing it, and it's now to the point where the numbers, I couldn't tally them every day or even necessarily every week. There's just a lot of movement there. But if you had told me that a couple of years ago, I'd have been like, no, I have to stay on top of this. I have to be very focused on it. You know what? My word count has gone up, exponentially since then, really.
Yeah, I hear that.
So.
All right, social media, pro or con? Do you think it's a waste of time for authors to get involved in sites like Facebook or Twitter, or do you find it an effective tool that more authors should try?
I think you should have some presence. Just because if you're gonna write a book and want to let your fans know about it, there's a lot of spam filters on newsletters, and so it's not necessarily always going to get through that way. And so, yeah, I mean, I have a Facebook presence, I have a Twitter presence. I don't know that I would waste a lot of time on Goodreads or Google Plus just yet, because there's not, And then the other side of that too is I have a lot of fun interacting with fans on Facebook, but it's also kind of it's easy to sink a lot of time on there. That's the same
distracting, yes. Ooh, shiny object. Let's go. And it takes you away from the book.
Well, and especially if you've got a little bit of a following. I mean, these are people who like you, and we all have egos at some point. We all want to know if people like our work, and we want to talk to people who like our work. And so, I mean, that for me, it's very easy to be like, no, tell me how great I am. Oh gosh, I wish everybody talked to me like this in everyday life. And so my thing is now I check Twitter and Facebook on my iPad or on my other computer, my non-writing computer, and then I take those and I lock them away during the day when I'm writing, and I don't let myself open up the door to get them until I am done with my writing for that day, because I have a very addictive personality when it comes to Facebook and social media. Not that I necessarily love using it, because it drains me a lot, but because of that, I could sit there and come up with unique ways to engage my audience all day long. But ultimately, at this point, they want my next book a lot more than they want me to just sit there and shoot the breeze with them about the events of the last one. So, I mean, there's time for that, but new writing.
Gotta have priorities. Okay, so now that you've released as many books as you have, and it's quite a bit, you said 26 there, what are the top 3 don'ts that you would recommend other authors should avoid, based on your experience?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Sounds like spending too much time on Facebook would be somewhere up there.
That I would highly encourage authors to control how, especially if they're part-time, control how much time you're spending on non-writing activities, because that's
it's distracting.
Well, it is, and I mean, if you only want to write one book a year, then I mean, it's not really the big a deal. And I'm not saying that as like, oh, you only write one book a year, ha ha ha, because I'm afraid it might come off that way, like, but it's not. I mean, write what you can write, and if your goal is to write one book a year and do it really well, then hey, good, that's a good goal to have. Do that, absolutely do that. But if your goal is to write multiple books a year, as most indie authors do, if they're looking to go full-time at it, then you really have to focus on eliminating the distractions in your life that are keeping you from turning up that productive word count. And so social media for a lot of people is that thing. For others, it's no problem at all. They don't care. Then maybe it's something else for them. But find those distractions in your life and put them off to the side. If it's writing fiction or watching television or whatever, those things will be fine without you for a little while, and usually they'll be there when you get back. So that's the number one thing. Avoid distractions. The second thing I would probably recommend to new authors is when you start a book, finish it even if it sucks. And
Yeah.
because that's the number one thing. Because I get new authors asking me for advice all the time. I haven't even finished a book yet. What do you recommend? Finish the book, even if it sucks, even if it's terrible, even if you are writing every word feeling like it is the most appalling piece of garbage that you have ever known to be unleashed on the universe. Because at least when you get done with it, you'll be like, I wrote a book. Like, I actually wrote a book. And then as an author, those first 10 books or 20 books or whatever it is, some people, they have a different route than me, and they really struggle, like, even after 20 books. And because we all do things a little differently. But finish what you start, because that is the number one thing. And even if you decide at the end of it, you're like super critical of it, and you really hate it, and you like don't even think you can fix it in the editing phase, just put it off to the side for a while and come back and read it again later. And if you still, I'm talking like 6 weeks to 2 or 3 months later, and if you still think it sucks and is terrible, then leave it in the shoebox and don't come back to it. But you might find it's not as bad as you think it is, and that the problems that you do have with it can be corrected with some judicious rewrites. So that's 2. Finish what you start. Third thing, have a plan. If you're looking to do this as a career, have a plan and follow that plan. Now, that doesn't mean you don't change the plan according to things that might happen later on. Like, for example, when I started out, my plan was write in a series, build a sales funnel to some extent, get people coming in through that first book in that series somehow, attract them to that first book, cover it in honey, throw it in front of the flies, cover it in manure, throw it in front of the flies, whatever it takes. In my case, it was, I read Lindsay's blog post because I was originally thinking 99 cents, and so I kept that book at 99 cents for the longest time. It was not gaining any traction. And then I read Lindsay's blog post, and she said free, and I said, what do I have to lose? My 5 sales a month? Okay. And so I set it free, and it took off. It did much better the next few months after that, and the second series exploded even bigger. I mean, it was getting to the point where it was like 10,000 sales a month back then. Which was huge for someone right out of the gate like me, who had only been doing it for about a year. So have a plan, work your plan, and don't be afraid to change if you hear advice from someone who's doing better than you that you think will work for what you're trying to do. So there you go. Off the top of my head, actually, I think those actually turned out really reasonably well.
Not bad at all.
Okay.
All right, that's it for my questions. Let me hand you over to Joe.
All right. Well, first off, we're right about at the hour. So you okay with sticking around a couple minutes longer to finish this up?
No, I have a dateline. No, I'm just kidding.
Some people have a hard out.
No, my kids are already in bed. We're good.
All right. Most of my questions actually have already been answered by in the other answers, but I'm going to start with this one. I was looking at your covers, and you have something that's been recommended to me that I haven't instituted yet, which is I refer to it as the big name approach, where your name is prominent on your cover, as prominent as the title, and sometimes more so, because sometimes your name is more letters than the title. Was that your decision, or was that just a cover designer just put the cover together that way?
Well, I mean, I approve all the covers. I think, how did that come about? Yeah, I wanted my name big because I had read on some blog or another a couple of years ago that you want your name big enough that you can see it on the small print of the Kindle if at all possible. So yeah, that was the logic and rationale as it was explained to me via whatever blog post I read. Is like people read on that small Kindle screen, or they're looking at it on their phone screen. You want to make it as big as possible so they can see the author's name. Now, in my experience, people are still not going to know your damn name at the end of it in a lot of cases, but at least it gives you a better chance.
Yeah. The way it was explained to me was basically the authors that are on the big 5, like the really successful authors, all have really big names, and therefore, if you put your name really big, it will make you look like you're one of them. So it seems a little manipulative, but I can see where you're coming from with that. And I thought that it wasn't worth it. I haven't done it. And then this happened, which is maybe sort of start to rethink that. I have 2 series that have a perma-free start. And a couple of months ago, I got an email from someone who really enjoyed the epic fantasy. And then a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from that same person saying they really enjoyed the sci-fi and didn't realize until they looked up my address to send an email telling me they liked it that it was written by the same person. So that's an instance where if they had seen that my name was on the sci-fi, it would have been a much easier sell to that individual So it's at least one situation where a big name would have helped. So I'm trying to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that thing about or maybe I had and I just filed it in the back of my mind, but I don't think I'd heard that thing about the bestsellers putting their names huge. Like, at this point, then, like, J.K. Rowling's next cover should just be her name and, like, in fine print the title of whatever the hell it is.
Pretty much. Another thing I noticed is you've got on your author page, you've got some maps of your settings.
Mm-hmm.
Did you produce those as like a writing aid, or was it just to have additional? I want to say just to expand the setting for your fans or anything like that?
So I had my own map when I first started out because the first book in the series involves a lengthy road trip in the second act where they're all over the place and it kind of jets around in settings anyway because I wanted to I fell into the trap of world building early on, and I was like, I've got to show them all these lovely places because I'm setting up the entire series, and we're going to go all these places. So, a friend of mine who's a lot bigger epic fantasy fan than I am read it early on, read the first book, and I didn't have a map at that point. And he goes, he threw a Tolkien quote at me about when I began, I wisely started with a map, and I'm like, well, okay then, this guy knows more than I do, so. My philosophy is if someone knows more than I do or is doing better than I do in an area, I'm just going to go ahead and take their advice. And so I went ahead and commissioned a guy off a website called the Cartographers Guild. I think it was like $100 to $150, and he did a black and white map for me. And I went back to him later on and have gotten a few more maps for him since then of various locales. So yeah, it was. Helpful to me. I had already had it, but it looks a lot more professional when it looks like this versus how I had drawn it, like in my crappy. I'm not an artist. I suck at art. So, yeah, it was helpful to me to know where everything was and not have it drift in my memory. I had an actual reference point to be like, okay, they're going from here to here. How far do you think that is? How many days by horseback? Whatever the case is. So, does that answer your question, Joe?
Yeah, yes, it does. And I ended up with a map not because I have a friend who, if he's listening to this, he knows exactly who he is, who basically told me, like, you need to have a map. If you don't have a map, then you clearly don't care about your setting. And that's not. I didn't make one until a fan asked for a map. I was like, all right, now I have a reason. And now since then, I literally. For the editing process of the most recent book, I sent my map. My editor requested a map so that she could proof my travel times and directions.
Nice.
So they're useful.
Yeah.
And I guess my last thing here is again, I don't do a lot of urban or contemporary fantasy.
You don't need maps.
When you do, no, you don't need maps. That's for sure. You can just use Google Maps, really, if you wanted to. But when you're writing something reasonably modern and set in an actual setting, you can include things like current trends, current issues, current technology. Mm-hmm. And has anything, like you say you plan out way in advance, have you seen anything happen in the world between when you started your plan for the series and when you got to the point that you were writing that you felt you should update your book in order to make it more modern and more marketable than you originally thought of?
Oh, well, I mean, I'll throw out an example, and you let me know if this sounds like it answers your question. So when I first started the Girl in the Box series, they're just like a group of people, well, it's a girl by herself. And then as it expands, she kind of builds a team, and at the end there's an epic fight. And they're part of a government agency associated with fighting this fight. And so one of the things I included that I felt was really modern was they had NSA support in order to monitor communications channels and track down this organization they were trying to fight. And they also had a drone on standby watching as an eye in the sky kind of thing. Now, I didn't plan that or any of the things that spun off of it, and I ended up keeping the two characters I introduced to do that as part of the later series that were not at all in my plan. So, I mean, when I plan an arc, I leave a lot of room to grow with the ideas that might come. And in fact, my Sanctuary series, I ended up having to add 2 books as half volumes because I didn't anticipate the way events would shake out after something I decided somewhat spur of the moment in the 3rd book. And so, but yeah, I try and put in some topical or some current events or I think I did something in Out of the Box 3 where I was like, oh, this is cool. This is something I read in the newspapers, and I put it into the book as like one of those, modern things that I thought was kind of a neat little thing. And well, actually, in the fourth book, there was something on 60 Minutes where they hacked GM cars and were like stopping them. So I put someone doing that in there, and like they brought someone's car to a stop, and like we're trying to create an intimidating atmosphere and for my hero to swoop in. And so they took control of the radio and like, want me to play an intimidating song? She's like, yeah, do that. And she opens up and grabs the guy out of the car, and the Monster Mash is playing. So
Good stuff. Yeah, well, that certainly fits the bill then, from what I had. I don't really have any more questions. Although honestly, over the course of this conversation, I really keep on comparing your contemporary fantasy thing to a superhero thing. I notoriously, amongst the other, anyone who listens, know my least successful book, my most ill-fated book, features superheroes, and heck, I might be able to spin that as contemporary fantasy instead. Who knows? Maybe it'll work better that way.
I took it. I mean, I went really grounded on it at the beginning. Like I kept it very modern, very very not fancy. In fact, I got called sci-fi early on by people who read it, and they're like, "Well, I don't know. I don't even read these kind of books." But I kind of got sucked in before it went weird and sci-fi-ish, and I just sort of hung on, and now 12 books later, 13, 14 books later, I can't put it down. It's really great. Now you got me reading all this other stuff too. So, I mean, I think if you can find an approach that works for you, like if you can find the entry point that makes it normal until you start getting weird, like once you get the buy-in, by like book 10, I've got, people falling out of planes and, flying through the air and having battles on a freeway with people that are flying. I mean, and when we first started out, it was like fisticuffs, because that was... and fisticuffs and guns, because that's how we settle things here on Earth. Us normal people that aren't powered. And and then eventually it just kind of all goes out the window and just do whatever the hell you want.
Yep, that's the arc of building action or whatever. And the handy thing about having a sort of intended hard end to your series is you don't have to worry about besting yourself into book 20 and 30 of the series if you've been trending upward like that.
Well, the problem is my Out of the Box series is plotted at 25 books right now, and so. Yeah, I'm going to have to keep working on that.
Either slow down or have some setbacks halfway through.
That's
okay. That's all my... that's all the questions I got, so I'm just going to hand you back over to Lindsay for our closing stuff.
All right. Well, you kind of answered these questions already for Jeff, but I was just wondering if you have any advice in parting that you would give to a new author or someone with just a couple books out who's not seeing too many sales yet.
If you're an indie author, odds are good you're not going to see a ton of sales on your first or second book. I mean, if you do, congratulations to you. You are one of the few. You are one of the fortunate few who sees things, take off right out of the gate, because most of us don't. I think I had 5 books out before I made more than $100 a month, and I had a book perma-free that was driving all of that for me. And I was up to like 6 or 7 books before I started to make what would approach a livable wage. And then after that, I mean, the curve went like this. It was just like this for about a year and a half to 2 years, and then all of a sudden it just shot up. And so the thing you've got to keep in mind, new authors, is that this book business is a long-tail business, and if you haven't had that explained to you yet, I mean, I don't want to get into super basic detail, but it essentially boils down to this. You've got the rest of your life to collect royalties. This isn't, and you get a bigger, fatter royalty share per book, and you'll basically, your efforts are going to accumulate. It's kind of like cholesterol in an artery. Yes, I finally found an analogy that works. It's like cholesterol in an artery. You're not going to notice anything until it blocks that sucker up, and then at that point things will explode for you in a violent and terrible, deathly way. I mean, you will at that point hopefully start seeing some success. But the nice thing about it is, if you've got 1 or 2 books out, you've got your whole writing career ahead of you. You don't have to necessarily, I know you probably want massive success right now, but you don't have to have it. You've got your whole writing career ahead of you, and you can focus on getting 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 books. And it's actually, in a lot of ways, easier to put books out if you're not seeing a lot of success, because once you start having to interact a lot more with fans, it takes more of your time and it takes more of your emotional capital in a lot of ways. Not saying it's a bad thing, just saying, it does. So, man, this is like the worst advice column ever. Dear Abby, can you depress me about my writing career? Why, yes, I think I can. I'll start talking about people's arteries exploding. Most indies just don't see success on the first or second book. I guess I would say keep at it. Switch. If you've really gotten a lot of exposure for one series and it's not taking off, or one work and it's not taking off, don't be afraid to jump to another series. And just keep trying. So that's probably about all that I've got.
All right, good advice in there. Graphic advice. We appreciate it. And why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and maybe what books they should check out of yours?
Well, actually, after that whole medical analogy, you're probably going to find me hiding in an alley somewhere, trying to avoid the medical practitioners and people that are going to be mad at me for using such a disturbing comparison there. But I mean, I'm at robertjcrane.com, or I'm on Facebook and Twitter after I finish my writing for the day. And sometimes I'll leave for like a week at a time. So if you don't hear from me, it's not because I'm actively ignoring you. Passively, I'm passively ignoring you. It's not personal. But if you go on my website, if you really have a lot of time to kill and some brain cells to spare, I have I have indie author advice, and it's there's a section on how to become a full-time indie author with my blunt, pull no punches, worse than the medical analogy advice laid out in about 10,000 words. So.
All right, well, I will put a link to that in the show notes at marketingsff.com to the indie advice, not to the artery stuff. And I guess that's about it for us tonight, and thanks for coming on, Robert.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk publishing.
Thanks for all that imagery. I love it.
Oh, good. Someone did.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.